Hey, welcome into another edition of the Rice Football Blue and Gray Preview Show. We're back. Week 12, game 11 of the Rice football season. Rain or shine, or I guess freeze, given the weather we've had in recent weeks. Back to talk Rice football. JP, first off the top, have you thawed out from the open air press boxes at Western Kentucky?
Yeah, it didn't take too long, but I forget if what I mentioned, what I didn't on air now, because I try to keep it real for the kids, Matthew. But when we get there, I try to get there 3 hours at least before a game. They had the windows wide open, and it's this garage that you can pull the old chain and it comes up. Well, you could pull the old chain the other way and it goes back down. So that shared the booth. It's an open area with a wall in the middle, but it's still hard to explain. And so I took the liberty. I was so proud of myself that I closed that garage door to show those Western Kentucky coaches. So we kept warm at least up until like 5 minutes before tip. Post game comes, and I put it back down. So it could have been a lot worse, is my long-winded way.
Speaking of, it could have been a lot worse. The on-field product, the results of the game, could that have been any worse? That was kind of, well, I guess we saw the Charlotte game, so that was bare bones bottom. But what's kind of your takeaway, picking up the pieces? Your last thought on that Western game, another hurt quarterback situation for Rice, unfortunately. What do we take away from that?
One, it couldn't have been worse, I don't think. The way they started, okay, first quarter, you're thinking, okay, they threw the pick, but then got another pick back, and it was only 7-0. So you thought, okay, you can work with that and find a way. But when the turnovers kept coming and the onslaught came, when Western Kentucky just really poured it on, like Western Kentucky just has the Owls number in this series, it wasn't good enough. And it continues that trend of good game, not so good game, good game, not so good game. It just seems like they can't string a series of games together. They haven't had back-to-back wins except for McNeese and then Louisiana. Something about that Pelican State series, I guess. But yeah, it's got to get better. And there's not a time to play with your food in the game coming up, because you got the big boys in town coming up this week, the crown jewel of Conference USA, so to speak.
Yeah, UTSA, who has lost one game in the month of November in the past 2 seasons. They're pretty good over there in San Antonio. Jeff Traylor has something going on, and it's going to be tough. We knew it was going to be tough. This was the portion of the schedule going into the season where, even if we weren't quite sure how good Western was going to be with their reload, we said, man, it's going to be a hard stretch to close out. And lo and behold, here we are. Frank Harris, I think, quarterback at UTSA, has won, 7 of 10 Offensive Player of the Week awards in Conference USA. It might not be that high, but it's pretty darn close. He's a bona fide stud, and I got a lot of playmakers back on offense, so it's going to be a tall task. But I guess setting the stage here, this is not a situation that has been foreign to the Owls before. They've won a couple games on Senior Day. As you mentioned, they have not lost back-to-back games yet this year, and it feels like every year they're due for one of these shockers. And I think the wins they had over Louisiana and UAB, those were surprising. Beating UTSA this weekend would definitely go down as a shocker. So kind of setting the stage for that. How important is this game? You get one more chance at 6 next week against North Texas if you don't pull it out. But given the roller coaster of this season, how monumental would it be for this, if you had to win one of the last 3, for this one to be the one out of the 3 that you get the W?
Well, on one level, for the standings, we keeping track here. I mean, just to win, okay, so that's obvious. You're bowl eligible. too. I know we're both just lowly state school guys here. But then to I've already lost my count. No, then
Two.
to beat an rival. That's the third one.
C.
C and D. No, it would be the win. I think I liken. You could say that the UAB win was that win of this season because you got that at home, but now you're left with that feeling, and like you appropriately set it up, that this has to be that win if they can do it. And Coach mentioned in his presser yesterday that I was snooping in on from out of state that they've played well on senior day in the past. So that would be, what are we up to? 6, 7, 5. So that there's a lot of reasons, a lot of ways too, that this could be a big win for the Owls. It's just going about and doing. I think last year's UTSA team is better, but credit to Jeff Traylor. They have reloaded, man. Like I'm sure you well know, probably even more than me, that they have just they have reloaded, and it's very impressive out of all the super seniors that graduated and with wisdom out in the safety corps.
Yeah, and man, I will say the difference a quarterback makes. I mean, that's really the difference between what UTSA and everybody else in Conference USA has been able to do. They have unquestioned the most accomplished and proficient quarterback in the conference. And I don't know if you would have said that last year. Maybe Bailey Zappi playing in the NFL at Western Kentucky had the edge. But if you're top two, you're doing all right. And Rice, we don't know. That'll be, I'll plug here. Make sure you're paying attention on Patreon, patreon.com/@the-roost for practice updates. Because at time of recording on Wednesday, we still don't know who is playing quarterback or who will be healthy enough to play quarterback for Rice. So Frank Harris going to be a deciding factor. And then sticking around on the offensive side of the ball for UTSA, this is a really good offense. Captain obvious, but they are without DeCorian Clark, wide receiver, who, I mean, they had 3 basically on track for 1,000-yard guys coming into the season. So he's gone, but they got a couple other pieces. Here's Bordy. Who else is Rice going to have to watch out for this weekend among those skill guys?
Yeah, you mentioned no Clark, and that's huge. But like we said a minute ago, that's what the reloading process has been for Jeff Traylor. You've got the slight Rice connection there with Joshua Cephas, not only a local kid, but his brother Aaron started Rice for a very blip on the radar. And pay no attention, this is not the final version. I had Rice basketball here the last couple of days, but this is still the work in progress. But you know that, but just for those the masses watching, like, that's not right. Anyway, Zachary Franklin, he is really good too, and we know the name Tyree Ogle Kellogg too. They're just really deep, and with them losing McCormick, I was like, I gotta try to refresh myself. What happened to Sincere McCormick? Well, he's with the Raiders now. Or at least on the practice squad. And I know he's attached to.
Yeah, I believe he's been hurt, but
okay. But yeah, it starts with Harris, like Coach Bloomgren said yesterday. But Brady, if you looked at last year's Bordy, just rose up the depth charts. Cephas doing what he did. Zachary Franklin, a lot of talent, of course, there too. And I was looking at the chart from last year. They've really shuffled the offensive line up too. You look at Maka. He is, and Haynes. Those are the 2 guys that had extensive playing time. So they only had 2 starters back on that offensive line. But some other guys, like Kelvin Davis, had been around that line. But largely.
And I want to jump in real quick on the offensive line, because if you're trying to identify how do you slow down this offense? Now, UTSA, number 1 scoring offense in Conference USA. Western Kentucky was 2. They're separated by literally fractions of a point per game. So these are 2 really good offenses. But if you're going to slow down UTSA, I think this is where it starts, because their offensive line, you mentioned some new faces just coming back who was available this year. And then they have had a lot of injuries up front. They've kind of moved a couple guys around. They were doing a similar thing to Rice early in this year, where they had this guy of like, well, he's a guard, but we don't have any tackles. So can you play tackle? And while we figure out, so they've been in the same boat on that front. They've kept scoring, and so it's been all right. But if you look at where's the weak point, if there is a weak point in this offense, and I'm saying that maybe in air quotes, it's up front in the offensive line, and you look at the depth that Rice has on the D line. This is a situation here where Rice has to, this is a really, really good, really talented roster that UTSA has. And there's a bunch of places where you're going to be even to trailing and the talent gap. This is a point where I think Rice has the talent advantage. You put the D line against the UTSA O line, and they got to capitalize on that.
Yeah, I think echo 100%. That's exactly where they have the big advantage in this one. Their ground game still is really good. I didn't have a chance to put up the rankings there yet, but averaging a shade under 200 yards a game, that's still obviously really good. But 315 passing is what they do so well, and 490 yards a game. That'll win you a lot of games. But here, I know this was at near the top, but 54% on third downs is an outrageous clip. So this is a team that speaks to the big play making ability and the great decision making ability from Harris to be able to keep his team on the field too.
Yeah, and that stems from having so many different options he can go to. That 54% number on third down is actually fourth in the country.
Yeah, I knew it was up
there. Which is
there.
Pretty darn good, which is not what you want to hear if you're a Rice defense that has had a heck of a hard time getting off the field on third down. And another thing here is they don't turn the ball over. You talk about other issues that Rice has had in recent weeks. UTSA, where did I had this? They pull up my other screen. Only one team in Conference USA. Let me get my act together. Only one other team in Conference USA has fewer takeaways or giveaways, than UTSA. Getting my words and my notes together, and that's Florida Atlantic. UTSA only lost the ball 12 times this season. If you're keeping notes, this is game number 11. So averaging one giveaway per game is pretty darn good. A Rice team coming off a 6 giveaway game. That's unfortunate. So good quarterback, good skill guys, can move the chains. It's a pretty potent offense. If they can get it going, you got to find a way to get them off schedule, force them into third and long, stop them on third and long, maybe get a couple turnovers of your own. It's going to take, maybe a pop game from the defense where you get the 3 or 4 swing plays, they all go your way. Because otherwise, if you're just man up against these guys, that they're going to make you pay, and they are going to. I'm bold prediction. This is not going to be a 17-14 game. I feel pretty confident about that.
Yeah, you wouldn't turn it down. That's one clear route that the Owls could get a W if they could keep it low scoring. But yeah, keeping the grown man Frank Harris down for that long is really tough to do. He's going to win the Conference USA Player of the Year most likely. You had the stats earlier. I've still got Rice Middle Tennessee basketball brain. It didn't have the national and what they call them conference rankings. But where they rank in the red zone? Because I took Bordy off the screen, but they're 90% in the red zone. So you book it. If they get it inside the 20, they're scoring 43 of 48. The Owls have faced a couple teams that have stalled there. UTEP was one of those, but this is a team, and that, again, speaks to that underlying belief that they have a senior who has another year of eligibility, by the way, in Frank Harris, that when they get it in the red zone, they go for the jugular, and they're not nice. They're not kind folks. I mean that in a football sense. They go for the jugular, and they capitalize.
It's wild. UTSA is actually they lead Conference USA in red zone scoring, but Rice is number 2. Interestingly enough, even if you account for 2 turnovers in the red zone last week. Actually, I'm just looking at it now. I think if you give Rice, if they get field goals out of that at a bare minimum, I think they're neck and neck with UTSA. I mean, we're talking 2 percentage points difference as it stands right now. But
Wow.
yeah, they're efficient, and Rice has been efficient too in the red zone when they've got down there. And I mean, on paper, two pretty potent offenses. So that brings us flip to the other side of the field on defense. And I think this has been one of the most fascinating things to watch with UTSA, because when the pandemic year hit and there was all of these scholarship situations where people were trying to figure out, okay, who do you bring back? Jeff Traylor basically put out a blanket invitation and brought everyone back. And
Mhm.
so the UTSA defense in 2021 was, I believe, 10 of the 11 starters were super seniors.
Mhm.
And that meant once they were all gone, it was a sea change, unlike what you see in major college football very often today. So they replaced everyone, and they really haven't dropped off hardly at all. I mean, this is a defense that is top 5 in Conference USA in just about everything. I mean, they're good against the run. They're good against the pass. They've had some shakier moments. I think that's where they've been exploited, and they have some of their incoming corners have kind of had some holes, but they're still pretty stingy. Yeah, who do we got here? I know one guy to watch in the secondary. They had the transfer come in from West Virginia.
Mhm.
I'm pulling.
Yeah, and I didn't fill in the rest. I got one other corner spot I did not either didn't save or I didn't put it in time. But the safety core is what Coach Bloomgren really highlighted yesterday. And you mentioned the 10 of 11, and the other guy, excuse me, cough break. The other guy that was the 11th that came back, Rashad Wisdom, he's out for the season with an injury. You hate that for his from the competition side's sake, but they have made up for that. Their safeties really come downhill, and coach talked about them just hitting the backs with good authority there with those hats at that line of scrimmage, Chapman and Wachuku, and they play so many guys on defense. I was looking back because they give you these depth charts, and you say, huh. Okay. Well, how much does this guy really play? So do I need to put him on? And most of these guys rotating in here, while they might not play 15, 20 snaps, they play a lot to get in there and just give the rest of the guys that little breather there. So it's a very deep defense still. The Taylor twins from Shiner, they have risen up the depth chart. But I mean, take your pick on the defensive line too. They're very Brown also played a lot. He was on there too deep last year, so very talented defense. Nameless, obviously, but 28 points a game, and they only give up 42% on third down. So what they do so well on offense, they prevent on defense, and they get teams off the field.
Yeah, wouldn't you know? Nick Troy Fortune was the guy coming in from West Virginia who's had a big year that I wanted to make sure I mentioned.
Yeah, he'll go right
and
here.
then, yeah, he'll go right there. I was about to say I'm looking for him to pop up, and he didn't exist. He does exist. You mentioned Brown; he's been a big guy. And then one of the things that I think has been super interesting is to watch their linebacker core, because I think maybe linebacker might be the not as glamorous a position in college football today, just given how. I mean, you look at Rice; they play 2 linebackers, and given the way defensive have kind of been schemed up, but they lost Clarence Hicks last year, going to the NFL from last year's team, and dude was a stud, and Trey Moore has stepped in the middle and just been huge for them at linebacker. Redshirt freshman guy who is going to, contend for all conference at a minimum honors. He's been really solid. And you got Trey Hermanson. He over on the left. He's been a guy that he played a lot last year. I think at some points he probably had a couple starts under his belt, but he's a veteran presence for them who's been around. So they got some dudes. This is a really talented defense, and it's going to be interesting. You mentioned how good they've been at getting people off of the field. I think where they've been most vulnerable, and we've seen this because so first off, UTSA has played a lot of close games, and they did last year. And
Mhm.
you kind of thought at some point they will stop winning all of these one-score games. They haven't actually. I thought this was interesting going back from their notes, but you go back through the past 2 seasons, UTSA is actually 10-1 in games decided by one score or less. So at some point, they're going to lose one of these close ones. Math says that it will happen. But the reason that some of these games, other teams have been able to kind of stay in the game is because you look at the secondary, who has been pretty good when it comes to coverage and getting people off the field, but they've given up a fair amount of long plays against them. You just look at explosive plays, and UTSA, actually only 2 defenses in Conference USA have given up more plays of 40-plus yards than UTSA, which is,
Wow.
I mean, you look at the better defenses in Conference USA, Western Kentucky first in that category, Rice third, UAB tied for third, Florida Atlantic fifth, North Texas 10th. Those are the good defense. They're up at the top, but UTSA is hanging around with Charlotte and Florida International and Louisiana Tech in that column when you look at explosive plays. So that's been a place where they have been vulnerable. And you cut that down and you just look at just pass plays. They've given up 10 pass plays of 40 yards or more. So we'll see who's available for Rice at the wide receiver room going into this game. But you got to think Bradley Rosner licking his chops, man. This is a game where, I mean, and I think you scheme it up a similar way you did to Western Kentucky, and you try and control the clock and be smart about when you take your shots, especially not knowing how it's going to go at quarterback. But Bradley Rosner is going to get behind people. Like Kobe Campbell is going to find space in the seam and break a couple off. It's just kind of timing those in and making them count, because this is a defense that is really good, but you can get to them. And I think we saw Rice have relatively decent success sans turnovers against Western Kentucky. And that's one more thing I wanted to point out about the UTSA defense. I talked about the UTSA offense. They don't turn the ball over, the offense does not give it away very often. Well, the defense also doesn't force them very often. They have 13 takeaways, UTSA does this season. For comparison, Western Kentucky has forced 30. Even if you take away the 6 from Rice, that's 24 in 10 games for Western. That's twice as many as UTSA has forced. So this isn't a defense that, especially, you mentioned Wisdom being out. He was just such a force that kind of ran things. So him not being on the field has to be part of it. But this is a defense that is not going to, I mean, you throw it up to them, they'll be there. But I don't think we got to worry to the same degree as, Western Kentucky was just wailing on guys and making those impact plays. So hopefully we don't see that again. Knock on all the wood.
Yeah, I've got a wooden desk here. It's funny you say that, because there was one time where I looked and it was one of those plays that might have been blown dead with the penalty, but Western Kentucky is just punching and scratching and clawing, obviously coached up to do that. And unfortunately, a lot of that game, the Owls fell into their hands. And while this might not be a same type of forcing turnover defense, that I worded that oddly, but they're still a very good defense in that they have a lot of depth, and I think they do a lot of carrying the load. There's not maybe that you mentioned a couple of the guys you singled out there, but without Wisdom, they have carried their equal parts. And yeah, we'll see. Luke McCaffrey didn't get much run last week. Bradley Rosner only got 2 catches. And we'll see who's throwing the football. As coach was pretty honest with us yesterday. If it's Shoki, in early, TJ was throwing to Kobe Campbell, but Kobe got some catches after TJ had to leave that game too. So, yeah. Hey, you run the football at Juma? You want to give the ball to him 12, 14 times? He's been playing well. He fits very well in a game like this to be able to take some time off the clock. Cam Montgomery has good speed and great speed in any game. We saw him outrace USC a number of times way back when in early September. So there are still playmakers and plays to be had. So I can't wait. Any game against a rival is just you sit up in your chair a little bit more, and that's the type of game that this has turned into.
Yes, and you mentioned Juma, and we don't dwell too long on the Rice stuff. We've covered that many times, but I do want to say something about that and the running game. Is we've kind of wondered all season, intellectual brutality, pound the rock. This is what this offense wants to do. We've wondered when it was going to get going. In the past two games, it was kind of covered over in the UTEP game because they had to win it through the air on that last pass to Bradley Rosner, but the running game was really good. And that game, Juma was really good. So was Cam. And then again against Western Kentucky. And the thing that I kind of circle and I look at is you have TJ McMahon go down in that game in the second quarter. He comes out of the game. The backup quarterback, who's a redshirt freshman who has like 3 passes in mop-up duty in his career against an FCS team. I know, everyone in that stadium knows the next 10 plays are going to be runs. Like, they're going to run the football. They did throw, I think it was twice on that drive, and the next 10 plays they threw, but it was all run left with Juma, run up the middle with Juma, run off the side with Cam, and it was just running the football. And they just moved down the field like a hot knife through butter. 5 yards, 10 yards, 8 yards, 6 yards. And that's something that Rice hasn't been able to run when the opposing team has to be honest against the pass this year. Like, just even up. But to be able to run the football like that when everyone knows that's all you can do right now, not quite. I mean, Shoki had some passes, but you obviously don't want to throw a young guy out to dry and make him carry the load. That got me really excited because Western Kentucky going into this week, they're number 2 in yards per game allowed on the run. UTSA is number 3, so it's a good run defense on paper, and I think their front seven is really good, but I think that can work really well for Rice. If you can get that run game going, you make those corners live on islands. I think the recipe to beat a team like this is not as maybe Herculean as it might look on paper.
Mm-hmm. 100%. That's why you're the man. And that drive you're talking about, they even had 4 backs. I remember noting it to Nate at the time that Dean Connors had some productive northerly runs getting downhill. And we saw Uriah West in the short yardage situation too. So yeah, it starts with Cam and Juma and Cam, however you slice and dice it. But yeah, the balance of the running game, getting some turnovers, and you tell me who the quarterback is, and then I'll tell you something else. But again, no knowledge. I've been in and out of the Nashville airport too many times in the last week, but around Nashville at least. I think TJ, he's shown his cowboy maverick ways. He'll go out there if he can. But it's Shoki, Coach Tui, and others. They'll have a good game plan. But hey, newsflash, it's about executing that game plan. But Shoki's got a cool, calm demeanor about him. I like him. And the times I've talked to him off the mic and just hearing what he said yesterday, he can make some plays, and Coach admires his grit. So if it is Shoki, come on, let's go. You gotta do it. Let's see it.
It would be only fitting at this point. Yeah. I mean, Rice has started 3 different quarterbacks now in every season under Bloomgren. So,
yeah, what's the number up to now? 13th different quarterback, right? If it is Shoki, but again, we don't have any inside info. But
that's a good question. I have my sheet up here that I have updated as of yesterday because
I've got it here
absolutely ridiculous the number of different quarterbacks that Rice has started. So let's see if Etrius starts the game this weekend. He will be what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I've got 12,
8, 9, 10. Yeah, is that 12th?
TJ was the 12th, so he would be the 13th, right?
Absolutely ridiculous. So that's who we are. Plug it again. You will want to check out the practice notes this week because man, we got a lot of guys, and getting over the flu, nicked up. Who knows who's we'll have left in the secondary if we get George back? All these questions. So we will see who's able to go. It's senior day. It should be a fun one at Rice Stadium. JP Heath on the call. As always, I'll plug this, and we had a brief conversation on Twitter. I know we're going over, but it's to talk about you, so it's okay. The Sync My Game. If people don't know about this, you need to do it. You can watch the game with Mr. Heath on the audio synced up at the same time. It's brilliant. It's technology in the 21st century.
Technology is fun. We've discovered that, and when we get it working on our end, we've decided it's fun too. So
we'll figure it. We're in mid-season form.
We have fun. Double duty. We got basketball coming up that afternoon, but I am focused on football. I've got a backup plan if need be for basketball, but wonderful crossover time of year. Can't wait for that I-10 shuffle coming up high noon, Brother Bartlett. High noon.
We'll see. 2 more of these. We will be back next week, talk North Texas in the final game of the regular season, at least for Rice football, and then everybody go get some turkey and hopefully fingers crossed for one more. Looky there we go, Rice Owls. We'll be back, guys. Rain or shine or ice or whatever we got. So until then, Rice fight
never dies. Hoot hoot.